Ooh, all right. Down to the last section of chapter 8. I know it's been a long one. I know it's been tough at some points, but it's something. This is a pretty big section when it comes to algebra and the future of mathematics, going into geometry, algebra 2, and then into calculus. Um, Being able to factor is a major process that you need to understand and need to have down for when you get into algebra 2 and pre-calculus. So this is the last section we're going to be talking about today, and it's using factoring to be able to solve equations. Okay. In math, we have this product called the zero product property, and this is something that is pretty common sense. It makes sense if you think about it, but you don't tend to think about it all that often. And what it says that if the product of two numbers is 0, or of two factors or two numbers, the product of two factors is 0, then at least one of those factors is 0. And this is something that you learned back when you first learned multiplication, but we didn't call it anything. Okay? If we think about 3 times 0 equals 0. Okay? X times 0 equals 0. We have two factors, 3 and 0. Then here we have x and 0. So there's two factors. And the only way that they can equal 0 is if one of those is 0. Okay? You think 3 times 1/3 is 1. 8 times 2 is 16. There's no way that I can multiply two things and get 0 unless one of those is 0. Okay? So when we go to use this, okay, what you need to realize is that when we factor, we're getting things that are factors. So I have two different parts. Okay? This one's already factored out for us. If I look here at example 1, x minus 5 and 3x plus 4. Okay? So if I want to solve for x, before we didn't have the equal 0 part. Okay? Now I'm solving for x because I have the equal 0. So since I have two things multiplied that equal 0, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each part and set it equal to 0. So we'll say x minus 5 equals 0, or we could say that 3x plus 4 equals 0. The zero product property tells us that one of those two has to equal 0. So if we make them both equal 0 and solve for x, we get x could equal 5. Or over here, if we subtract 4, 3x is equal to negative 4, so you divide by 3. Or we get x is equal to negative 4/3. Okay? Those are the two things that x could be for this solution to be true. Okay? And that's really all section 8 or chapter 8 section 6 is using the different types of factoring that we've talked about to solve equations. Okay? Notice at the top, the first thing you have to do is make sure the equations are equal to 0. So the first thing I need to do here is subtract 7x from both sides and make it x squared minus 7x equals 0. Remember that you cannot add or subtract things that are not like terms. So I cannot make that negative 6x or negative 6x squared. They're two different exponents. That one's a 2, that one's a 1. Two different exponents means I cannot add or subtract them. Okay? So now I have to look to see how I can factor it. And I kind of gave you a big hint here in the directions using the reverse distributive property. I know that I can take an x out of this, and so I get x minus 7 equals 0. Okay? Now I have two factors, 1 and 2. They're multiplied together. That equals 0. So I know that x has to equal 0, or x minus 7 has to equal 0. In which case, I solve for x, and x equals 7, or x equals 0. Those are my two solutions. Okay? So for every one of these, you're going to get two solutions. Or, yeah, we're just going to get two solutions. Okay? You'll learn something else in the future that talks about how you actually have the same number of solutions as your highest exponent. So if I had had an x to the 3rd or an x to the 4th, I would have 3 or 4 solutions. We're not going to go any higher than just 2 solutions. Okay? So when I have this example, I have the trinomials. I remember ax plus ax squared plus bx plus c. So my first step when I have the equal sign is to always make sure it equals 0. So I'll subtract 6 to get x squared plus 5x minus 6 equals 0. Then I can cover up that equals 0 if you need to, and all it is factoring. Go back to our chart. I need to find two things that multiply to negative 6 and add to 5. Yeah, positive 5. Okay, that's going to be 6 and negative 1. 6 plus negative 1 is 5. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. So I know that x plus 6 times x minus 1 equals 0. Set each of those equal to 0. X plus 6 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. Solve for x so that x equals negative 6 and x equals 1. Okay? Notice I started out with an x squared at the beginning, so I got two solutions. Okay? So on the back, we'll do two more here. Did an example of each type of factoring that we had. So you'll be able to see how it works for each thing. So what I need to do here, first step, make sure the equation equals 0. So the first thing I can do is add the 3x. Now, I have like terms here. So I can combine my 3x with my 9x. Okay, so that gives me 8x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 4. Then I need to subtract the 4, and I can subtract that with my negative 5. So 8x squared minus 6x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, this is why it was so important that you understood the concept of adding and subtracting like terms when we talked about that earlier in the year. Because if you don't understand what it means when I talk about like terms, you're not going to know what it is here. Okay, so we'll let me move up top here so we have a little bit more room. X squared minus 6x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, how do we factor a trinomial that has a number in front? We multiply the first and last to get negative 72. Okay, so that means I need something that multiplies to negative 72 and adds to negative 6. Well, if you do some of the math, you'll get negative 12 and 6. Multiply to negative 72 and add to negative 6. So let's write it out, all four terms. 8x squared. Then we have minus 12x. Then we have a plus 6. Then we have a minus 9. And that all equals 0. Okay? Remember, all I'm doing right now is factoring just like you did in section 4. Okay? I didn't introduce anything new. I'm not introducing anything new in this entire section. Okay? We're factoring just like we did. All we did was add the equal to sign at the end. So now I need to pull out something. 8x squared minus 12x. Well, I know those are both divisible by 4 and x. So then I can end up with a 2x minus 3. Then I look at 6x minus 9. Well, those are both divisible by 3. So I end up with 2x minus 3. Okay. Put those together and say that it's 4x plus 3 times 2x minus 3 equals 0. And now here's the new step. Once I get it down to two factors, take those two factors. 4x plus 3 equals 0. 2x minus 3 equals 0. Subtract 3. 4x equals negative 3. Divide by 4. And x is equal to negative 3/4. My other solution, I'll add 3 so that 2x equals 3. Divide by 2. And x equals 3 halves. There's my two solutions. All right? Whew. I know it's a lot of it's a long process. It can be a lot of work. But if you work step by step, and if you had learned each step along the way, it's just putting all these little steps together into one big problem. Okay? That's all math is putting little steps together to be able to solve big things. Okay? And last but not least, remember, every time we have 4 terms, we're going to want to solve and factor by grouping. Okay? So I can see the 4 terms here, so I group the first 2 and the last 2. I see I can pull an x out of the first to get an x plus 2. Out of the second, I can pull a 3 out to get an x plus 2. Rewrite it so that I have it factored properly. X plus 3, x plus 2 equals 0. Then set those each equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. Then I just solve for x, so that x equals negative 3. Or if I subtract 2, x is equal to negative 2. And there's my, again, 2 solutions. Okay? So, all chapter 6 is, or section 6, is taking all the different factoring techniques that we've learned this chapter and showing how you can use them to solve for x in a specific equation. Okay? I hope, again, as always, I hope this is making sense. If not, please, please, please ask questions. Like I said, factoring and using factoring to solve equations is an essential building block that you will need throughout the entirety of high school. Okay? So, we will have one more short little video here. We're going to do a little concept summary where we fill out a visual aid, a graphic chart, graphic organizer, so to help us keep track of when we're supposed to do which type of graphing. Okay, so make sure you're watching for that, and see you next time. Bye.